Well, everyone, it's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland Reviewer, and welcome to the Wasteland, my weekly show where I take a deep dive into a particular film, and you guessed it, continuing the Scorsese train. And this time we're going to be talking about Bringing Out the Dead, which is his 1999 thriller starring Nick Cage, which that'll be interesting. And this week, Foster's back, who is now consistently becoming a regular here on the show. And I was just talking to Rowan about this because he is also becoming one. And apparently you've been hanging with him too. So, but yeah. Foster, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
And before I jump into talking about our coming attractions for this week, Foster, would you like to shamelessly plug anything before we get things started?
Sure. I've got a Twitter and a Letterboxd. Twitter would be if you want to get in contact with me, I guess, chat with me about movies. And Letterboxd is if you want to see what I'm watching. So those are both FOSTH101.
There you go. And more people keep popping up on Letterboxd, which is cool.
Yes.
Because we get to see everybody's thoughts on movies and especially their star ratings because, like, bam, it's right there. So now, for those who haven't tuned into the show before, we have three segments. We have coming attractions, our feature film, and our recommendations. But getting things started with what is our last weekend in January, because this has been an interesting ride, as every January is when it comes to films. But Foster, what's the film that you're most excited about coming out this weekend?
Okay, I only just learned about this movie maybe 10 minutes ago, but this is called The Fallout, and it is going to be on HBO Max on Thursday. So this is starring Jenna Ortega. Sorry, 1 minute. That'll be fun to listen to on the podcast. Jenna Ortega, who is just in Scream.
Yep.
And I thought she was fantastic. And so this already seems like it's got a lot of positive critical buzz. So that alone, I think, sells me. It seems like it might be an intense sort of movie. That the 2-sentence IMDb description talks about like the emotional fallout after a school tragedy, which is always like, yikes, whenever that's in the plot of a movie these days. But yeah, the fact that it's popping up on HBO Max, has Jenna Ortega, looks like Maddie Ziegler as well, and seems like the people who've seen it really like it. I will probably check this out.
There you go. I was definitely a huge fan of Jenna Ortega in Scream because you know you gotta set the tone with that cold open, and boy did she, and that was a lot of fun. And you know, we're going to pour one out for Cyrano, which this was Cyrano's third release date, which now has a fourth release date. Because to be frank, I'm pretty sure both of us would have picked that at this point. But, you know, we do what we can, which that's coming out on Thursday. So honestly, both of us are kind of cheating. Neither of these are actually coming out during the weekend. This Wednesday, though, Compartment No. 6 would have already released by this video popping up on Friday. But this is it's a Finnish-Russian film, which is up for Best International Feature. A woman is trying to escape an enigmatic love affair by hopping on a train. So it's a train movie. And, you know, if it's getting Oscar buzz, that's more attention that I'm going to get than, you know, the latest Ice Age movie that's coming out on streaming on Disney+. So I'm interested to see it. I've been able to catch up on a few of the other big contenders like A Hero and Drive My Car. So it's going to be an interesting one come the end of March when the actual Oscars are this year. I wonder if they're ever going to go back to February. I don't know. Now I'm just like, I have to wait another 2 months for this, but the anticipation will be growing. But those are our coming attractions this week. So this time we're going to be talking about Bringing Out the Dead, which is Martin Scorsese's 1999 thriller about an ambulance EMT who is definitely losing it a little bit, is very disenchanted about his job, being haunted by the specter of a patient that he couldn't save. And what do you do when you need somebody to slowly lose their mind? You cast Nick Cage. So, Foster, what interested you on coming on to this week's episode?
Nicolas Cage.
Yeah.
Next question.
That's all we need. And
all we need.
I'm writing about this. I'm like, the first paragraph or two is just me talking about Nicolas Cage.
Yeah.
Because, like, I feel like you either love Nick Cage or hate Nick Cage. I don't think there's a whole lot of in between, because it's either like you just think he's ridiculous or he's the right amount of ridiculousness that you need to inject into any movie. Except he's a great actor. It's
Yep.
just he makes some very, very bad choices in terms of movies, except like Pig, which can you imagine if he gets nominated for Best Actor this year for Pig? I'd
He should.
be so excited.
Yeah.
But so, Foster, what are some of your initial thoughts after watching Bringing Out the Dead?
Okay, so I went into it knowing it wasn't going to be like a straightforward plot, you know, might not be the most accessible. I was kind of expecting like the nighttime driving scenes of Taxi Driver, but in an ambulance. So overall, I liked it. But it's just not the most fun, the most fun movie to watch. I can't speak today, but it's like not one you just pop on if you want to have like a nice Friday night romp, you know. Nicolas Cage, I do think is really, really good. I agree with you. I think when people were surprised at how good he was in Pig, I'm thinking you just haven't seen enough Nicolas Cage movies. The man's a good actor. Deal with it. I think this is good evidence. Also, I think it's probably the weirdest Martin Scorsese movie. Like it feels very different from a lot of his other movies. Like I know you just did Kundun. That's also pretty different, but I guess at a certain point we just have to realize that he's kind of a chameleon in terms of the projects he takes. But yeah, it has this kind of like 90s grunge music video aesthetic to it.
Oh my God. So watching the movie, let's talk about a little bit of the music first, because there's a couple of like pretty standard, like there's a Stones song. I'm pretty sure there's a Frank Sinatra song at one point.
Yeah.
But there's a couple of like real late 90s choices. I'm just like, wow, when was this made? The late 90s?
Yeah.
And it just had that feel. And Richardson, the cinematographer, like this does feel like you're watching something out of the late 90s.
Yeah.
And it just has that vibe to it. And it's so interesting because this is directed by Scorsese and written by Paul Schrader, who both did Taxi Driver together. And it does have like the trappings of Taxi Driver, except an EMT instead of a taxi driver. Except I feel like Frank's a much more accessible person than Travis Bickle is. Except, and it's also a very different kind of performance. Because like you could tell Robert De Niro just gets progressively more intense, and Nick Cage gets progressively more Nick Cage throughout the movie. And I guess, Foster, what were some of the things that stuck out to you the most, that you liked most about the film?
So even though I'm kind of making fun of it, I actually really like the visuals and the way they look. Like it's the nighttime scenes that they really make full use of like those red ambulance siren things at the top of the car, and like the it's like almost like a watercolor painting, those streaks of light from the cars at night because it's raining, and you're seeing Nick Cage's reflection through the window of the ambulance, you know. So like I really do like the visual style. I think it's pretty cool. What was your question? I realized I was just talking and I had no idea where I was going with that.
Well, just some of the things that really stuck out to you, like the things that you liked most about the film.
Sure. Okay. I also think it does a really good job of capturing the kind of in between being awake and asleep, in between life and death kind of vibe that this movie is going for. It feels like purgatory basically is the vibe I was getting from the movie, at least, which I think is probably intentional because Paul Schrader and Martin Scorsese, right? So like I think that's probably accurate to what it would be like to be someone in like the medical field at this time, especially. And like my sister's actually an EMT, so some of the stuff I'm seeing in this movie, I'm like, yeah, that's familiar to me. Like the ridiculous long hours, being up for 24 hours straight, or like they have like their repeat customers, basically the people who like repeatedly need to be picked up every.
Mark Anthony.
Yeah. By the way, he pops up in the most random movies. Like you'll just be watching Man on Fire or In the Heights, you know.
Yeah.
There he is.
Which he was a crazy character in this movie, and just the kind of crazy character that embodied the ridiculousness of this life that Frank's living in this. And I appreciate you talking about like the purgatory feel, because like this is very obviously a very biting look at healthcare in America, and especially like in New York City. And this is supposed to take place, I think, in the early 90s. Yeah. And like AIDS is a thing. There's some AIDS patients, and like just going in. So just this hospital in a nutshell. Of walking into this hospital, and you have the guard. It's like, don't make me take off my sunglasses. Like basically this like gatekeeping this emergency room. And then you have the nurse right behind him who's like, well, whose fault is this?
Yeah.
That you're here. Just like, wow, no bedside manner at all. And then you have the doctor who's like half burnt out, half just like,
yeah.
What are we going to do? And obviously one of the biggest pieces of the film is this man who Frank saves at the beginning of the film, who then he grows this connection with his daughter. And throughout the whole entire film, like Frank's being haunted by this young woman who he couldn't save, and now is being haunted by this man who just wants to die. And it's just like, and the moment where they were talking about, it's like, yeah, we zapped him like 15 times today to get him going. It's just like, what kind of life is this man gonna live after this point? And like Frank's the one who brought him back to life. Well, to life. And he's just barely holding on. And that, I felt like that was obviously the biggest thematic thread through this whole entire film, is like that idea between being caught between life and death.
Yeah.
And like Frank seems to have a death wish in some shape or form, and he's stuck in between his job, because it's not like he's fully there and they won't let him quit.
Yeah. Keeps trying to get fired. But
every interaction with his boss kept reminding me of Weird Connection to Princess Bride, because like, Wesley, I'll kill you tomorrow. And he's just like, trust me, Frank, I will fire you tomorrow. I just need you today. And it's just like, this man's never going to fire him. Just needs him. But it's such an interesting, the more I think about it, like you said, that there's so much of this film that's like the in-between of things, and just being stuck in this purgatory. And you can feel Frank at the beginning of the movie, like Nick Cage is pretty reserved, and like you could just tell he's tired. There's a couple of moments. I think it's one of the first times Tom Sizemore comes up to him, and just the look Nick Cage gives him of just like, it's a combination of like, are you kidding me? And like, I'm so tired.
Yeah.
But as the film goes on, like Nick Cage is getting more unhinged, pushed closer to the ledge. And at some point he's just gonna go. Go. But so I know for me, Nick Cage was great. And then like you have Patricia Arquette, which is interesting because Rosanna Arquette popped up in a few of Scorsese films before this. But I had a blast with his partners.
Yeah.
So first off, you have John Goodman, who any amount of John Goodman in any movie is just great. And he's complaining like, so why does it always have to be on the top floor? And them getting to the house at the beginning and him complaining about his food. And like, he's fine. He's just a bit of a complainer. And then he calls out sick. And then we get Ving Rhames.
He's so funny in this.
Oh my God. Ving Rhames was one, like, might have been the best part in this movie.
That took me by surprise, but he has the funniest moments for me, which there are funny moments in this movie. I don't know if we said it's kind of like darkly funny, because it's like, what are you going to do if you're in this bleak, hopeless world other than be a New Yorker and kind of be sarcastic and joke around about things. But like when they go to that, gosh, I can't even think how to describe these scenes, but
some kind of club.
Yeah, exactly. And then the one guy's like, please tell me he's gonna be all right. And Ving Rhames is like, no, he dead. And then they have that whole revival scene when really he's fine. He's just, or not fine. He had a heroin overdose, but he's gonna live. I mean, and Ving Rhames like leans into it and acts like a TV preacher or something, like he's gonna raise him from the dead or whatever. That was something.
That was honestly my favorite scene in this movie.
Yeah, I think me too.
Yeah, because he's just like, he's dead, and then Nick Cage looks up, he's like, and like Nick Cage is staying pretty quiet the whole entire time. It's like they all grab hands. It's like, Lord, bring him to life. And he injects him with the whatever kind of medicine that is that like kickstarts you after an overdose, and he's okay. And then the perfect shot was when Ving Rhames is standing there with this giant cigar in his hand and just like puffing on the cigar and just throws that one last one-liner in that scene. And like and the biggest surprise to me was he had hair. I'm like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Ving Rhames has a whole head of hair. Never seen this before. And because like he's a fun guy, but also a bit of a perv, just straight up sexually harassing the woman on the dispatch, which it's either that woman or Martin Scorsese the whole entire time doing the dispatch in the movie.
Yeah.
But and then you have Tom Sizemore, who is a sick bastard. And oh my, we're the mid to late 90s a thing for Tom Sizemore though.
Yeah.
Because like True Romance into Heat, into Saving Private Ryan, into this, and he's just piece of garbage. And how he interacts with all the characters, especially Mark Anthony's character, really messed up. And it basically like he just doesn't want to save anybody. It's just like, what are you doing this job for? And he's really enabling Frank throughout the most of that and like pushing him to the edge. Because Scorsese's really bringing out his like manic attitude energy in this film, because there's scenes where in this film where it's just like there's this crazy energy of the editing and the shots and the flow, which only Nick Cage can match in terms of acting, which I'm like, this is probably why Scorsese wanted him in this movie. But in terms of what did you think of the relationship between Frank and then Patricia Arquette's character that was developing throughout it?
It's probably my least favorite part of the movie, just because it's, I don't know, it's like I got exactly what they were doing with the other three paramedics. Like you could see how his partners were coping with this difficult job in a different way, like how Tom Sizemore becomes like insane, I guess, I don't know, and like kind of gets some twisted sort of fun out of it, versus like Ving Rhames, who tries to keep things lighthearted and funny, you know, to cope with it. I don't know, I think Patricia Arquette is good in it, obviously, because she's a good actress, but I don't know, I'd have to mull on that more, because I don't know if I said this is the first time I've seen this movie.
This was actually the first time I watched this as well. This was one of my last few first time watches along the way, because like, to be honest, once you hit the 2000s, I've seen like every single narrative Scorsese film, like probably multiple times at this point. But like, I had never heard of this movie before I started doing like the research to set up my show. I'm just like, what's this? And I'm like, Nick Cage is in this? How did I not know this movie before? But I would agree, like, I feel like she's kind of being used narratively as like a last stitch like hook into normal life for him, except then she has her way of coping with drugs and
with Curtis.
So honestly, my least favorite part of this movie is the first time he goes to him with her, except the one moment when Nick Cage takes the drugs.
That's a good moment when the snow's falling backwards.
Yeah, and that whole sequence where we experience what happened to that young woman, and then Nick Cage just starts like yelling.
Yeah.
Like, and that whole entire section, I'm like, okay, I can see why this was included in the movie, but like I just felt like that section felt like an unnecessary diversion
Yeah.
in this film because like generally most of Scorsese films are longer than this. This is
Mhm.
just like 2 hours long, but like did we really need that? But I
Yeah.
guess the point of it was like trying to show like Patricia Arquette's not exactly coping with this kind of situation very well. And then when they come back and
Mhm.
he's like Cliff Curtis is impaled
Yes.
on that fence, and like honestly, if he never went the first time and that was like the first time meeting him and he got called to that, I would have been perfectly fine with that scene being left in because that's just
Sure.
shown like the absurdity of this job. And how the cops didn't strap Cliff Curtis's character down,
Mhm.
but they strapped Nick Cage, and Nick Cage almost gets thrown off of the building,
Mhm.
which is crazy.
Yeah.
And just it's so interesting. And a lot of Scorsese films love the voiceover, and
Yes. This
Nick
this one
Cage
especially with
Nick
Nick
Cage can
Cage.
give some voiceover adaptation. And you could definitely feel like they make a lot more sense in films like this for me, where it's like we're trying to get inside the head of the protagonist, and like they feel so essential in Taxi Driver because to be able to for us to even comprehend what the hell's going on in Travis Bickle's head. And I feel like it's pretty important in this film too, because it's serving the same purpose. And like if you really strip away, it's a very similar kind of setup to Taxi Driver
Yeah.
in terms of like the profession and getting lost in it and stuff like that. But obviously, narratively, they diverge into pretty different ways. But
Mhm.
they still have this strange love connection. Obviously, Frank's a much more functioning person than Travis is, and Frank doesn't try to take Patricia Arquette to a porno for like a first date, which good first step. Probably
Mhm.
not do that.
Yeah.
But I guess in terms of this film, if you're trying to do like a selling point to this for somebody to go check this out, what would be the big thing that you would try to tell people?
Okay, so I wouldn't recommend this to most people just because I don't think it's accessible at all. Like, I think like if you look on Letterboxd, it has like kind of a cult status almost as like Martin Scorsese's underrated gem that no one's seen, you know.
Mhm.
But I think that's really just for like niche little movie people who are in their bubble. And so I think if it sounds appealing to you to watch like Nick Cage go through like a taxi driver like journey as a paramedic, where you're like exploring the realm between life and death and blah blah blah. If that sounds appealing, then that would be my pitch. Watch it because then you'll love it. But I'm just imagining like my mom watching this, being like, "Foster, what is this? Why
Well,
did you show me this movie?"
what's funny is I actually have a story about
Yeah.
taking your mother to the movies. But this is the kind of film like this. So this is less accessible than the one that I'm going to compare it to, but this had a lot of similar vibes to crap. Why am I blanking? I've just watched all these Scorsese movies. His
Another Scorsese.
yeah,
After Hours.
After Hours, yeah. So
Yeah.
like it has that like first off, this movie starts off with like New York, and it's
Mhm.
just like okay, Scorsese. But like it shows like the gritty disgustingness of New York City, and like we're kind of along for the ride
Mhm.
with this character. Like obviously Frank is like here in it because like this is his job. And it isn't just like one singular night of him going through like this craziness of things that he didn't experience before. But I don't know, it channels the same kind of weird New York energy that I feel like if you're not generally from around New York, you might not know what I'm talking about. But being from New Jersey and being close enough to New York, it's funny because I know like that kind of thing about New York, and I especially know that kind of thing about Philly. Like, I don't know if have you ever watched It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia?
No, I have not.
So yeah, those are Philly people.
Mhm.
It's pretty weirdly accurate about people in Philly. But the thing is, it's like that kind of energy. And it's like very few directors understand that and connect with that as well as Scorsese does.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why, and it's so interesting because he takes a look at New York in so many different ways. And it's funny because next time is Gangs in New York, which obviously takes place during the Civil War and has a very different outlook on New York. And then, you know, in the very last moments of the movie, just be like, this has been about New York all along. I'm like, oh crap, this is supposed to be about a revenge story.
Yeah.
I'll have a lot of feelings about, apparently Adam and I have a lot of feelings about this movie. So next week's episode is going to be very interesting. But to go back to, so I have a story about things to not take your mother to.
Okay.
So I remember when The Killing of a Sacred Deer.
Oh, yikes.
Came around because I was still living in Lawrenceville, New Jersey, and my mom was living in Cherry Hill, and I would go down to AMC Voorhees, which is an AMC classic, which had indie films.
Mm-hmm.
I moved to Mount Laurel, and now that one's like 15 minutes from me. I'm like, yes. But Killing of the Sacred Deer was only playing in Voorhees. I drove down and I saw my mom beforehand and everything. She's like, you're going to the movies alone? I'm like, yeah, go to the movies alone all the time.
Yeah.
And she's like, don't you want somebody to come? I'm like, Mom, you're not going to like this movie. And she's like, I'll come. Not a movie to watch with your mother. No. You know, when Nicole Kidman's performing some quid pro quo, Bill Camp's character, and I'm just staring straight at the screen because I could not possibly look at my mother and see her reaction at that point. I'm just like, okay, fun time. But yeah, I don't think this is exactly the move. Like, unless your mother is a cinephile and is like super into film, I don't know if this is one I would recommend either. Yeah. Which, so I've been able to do a decent amount of research on some of the films. Like, even just, I take a quick look at Wikipedia and stuff like that, but like, there wasn't a whole lot about this movie, like pre-production or anything.
There was not, no. I was looking too.
But it did talk about, one thing I did see is like, this was a box office bomb.
Yeah.
And I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
Because like, if, obviously Nick Cage was pretty big in the late 90s. So like, he was nominated for an Oscar for Leaving Las Vegas. He had Face.
Won.
Huh?
He won.
Oh yeah, he won his. He's an Academy Award-winning actor. People. Nick Cage is a legitimate actor.
Have you seen Leaving Las Vegas?
Yes.
Yeah, and I mean, it's like Alcoholism, the movie, but I mean, he's good.
Well, yeah, and you know, I was expecting to go in and see like a very serious Nick Cage performance, but it still has.
Yeah, no, he's nuts in it.
Oh, him going down the aisle in the liquor store with the bottles of alcohol. Oh my God, that got me so bad the first time I watched that movie. But yeah, he won an Oscar. He was in Face Off. So like, he had Con Air under his belt already too. So like, he was in a very specific place, and then he's in this, which is very interesting. And then, you know, turn of the century into the 2000s, and besides like the Mandys of the world and the Pigs of the world, Nick Cage is just chilling out on VOD doing trash. But this was like a big thing, and like, I guess they thought Nick Cage was enough to like sell this movie. And like, it had like, I feel like anything written by Paul Schrader is not going to be something that's going to be very accessible to people.
Yeah.
And it shows, because like, this is a dark, it's darkly funny at times, but like, it has a dark look at the world. And I think that's just a trademark of Paul Schrader. It's like, nobody was like, the card counter didn't become a giant box office hit. And to be honest, like, how many Scorsese films are like giant box office hits in general, especially not now? Like, it killed me inside when Silence made like no money.
Yeah. And only got one nomination. And I think it was just the cinematography, which is great, but it's like, probably deserved a lot more than that.
Yes. And it only was because you drop a trailer in a month and a half before the movie comes out and drop it in December with no fanfare, and you're just like, wait a minute, there's a Martin Scorsese movie out.
Mm-hmm.
And then The Difference, The Irishman, which I feel like everybody knew about The Irishman. My dad and my stepmom watched The Irishman on Netflix, and I'm like, what? Because like my dad, so to paint a picture, my dad and my stepmom watch, like, their biggest thing is watching Yellowstone every week that comes out. My dad loves his action movies and stuff like that. I remember bonding over Highlander, but like stuff like that. And it's just like they watched The Irishman. So obviously The Irishman got a lot of attention, but
and Wolf of Wall Street, I think, has become huge.
Yes.
Yeah.
And no matter how dark and despicable that movie is, it is ridiculously accessible because
it's very entertaining.
Time.
Yeah.
And The Departed. I feel like 99% of the people out there are just like The Departed.
Yeah, I love The Departed. That might be my favorite if I had to pick one, honestly. I also love Hugo. That's one of my favorites too.
Oh, I remember watching Hugo for the first time and just being like, I'm in love with this movie.
It's the best.
I love how much this movie loves movies, and I love it for it.
Yeah.
So there you go. But yeah, so I don't know if I would also go around recommending this to people, but for all my cinephile fans out there, I do think this is an interesting film from Scorsese, and that really captures New York. It has a pretty unhinged performance from Nick Cage at times. So, it has its benefits, and it definitely is one of those under the radar type films for Scorsese. But I guess, any final thoughts, Foster, about Bringing Out the Dead?
I might recommend it if you're just going through Nicolas Cage movies and you want to see a good performance from him. This is one of them. Probably would also be interesting if you're in the medical field in some way. Like maybe you'll notice some things that I don't notice, and you'll sadly relate to parts of this movie.
Yeah, I was about to say, hopefully you don't relate too much to this movie because it's a pretty sad situation. Yeah,
and then I agree with what you were saying a couple minutes ago about like Scorsese and Paul Schrader being able to capture New York so well. Like as grimy and gross as this movie is, because I live in New York, there are moments where I'm like, yep, that sounds about right. Like when they're talking about how like 5 or 6 a.m. is the worst time because you think it's about to become the sun's about to come out and everyone's gonna go about their normal day, and then meanwhile the camera just pans across this naked homeless man walking on the street. It's like, yeah, that's it.
Before COVID, I would make trips to New York probably once every couple months.
Yeah,
like a hop a train and go into the city, go see a show or something, or get John's Pizzeria because of that. And I remember being in New York for like the Santa thing and just seeing people like knocked out drunk at 10 o'clock in the morning already. I'm like, wow, you didn't take too long, did you?
Yeah.
Crazy things. But last segment on the show is some recommendations. So Foster, what would you like to recommend to people?
All right, I'm going to recommend a little HBO limited series that's 4 episodes long called Landscapers. This is a true crime show, but it is nothing like what you think of when you think of true crime shows. It's not like True Detective or Mindhunter or anything like that. It is Olivia Colman and David Thewlis are the 2 leads. They're both fantastic. And I think really they're the reason to watch this show. But the premise is that it's based on a true story where these 2 people murdered Olivia Colman's parents 15 years before the events of this limited series. And this limited series is about the fallout of that crime. So you're seeing them being interrogated in prison and stuff like that. So like I said, the reason to watch it is Olivia Colman and David Thewlis, because they have, I think from what I understand, like the real case, we don't completely know what happened. And I think the show plays into this a bit. So you really never know what to make of these characters, and your opinion of them is going to change multiple times throughout the show. But like Olivia Colman especially plays this character as like a sweet old lady but you also know that she has killed her parents. But then the show maybe tells you why that happened, you know, and so like your opinion flips on these characters so many times. And David Thewlis is kind of nuts in this show. Like he's doing something strange, which I loved because I love David Thewlis and I think it's great. But like you just can't quite figure out what's going on behind his eyes when he's being interrogated. So I think the show handles it well. But really, what's also interesting about it, aside from the performances, it's really visually creative. I mean, depending on the kind of person you are, you might find it pretentious, but I thought it was really cool. There's a lot of black and white scenes. The aspect ratio changes quite a bit. There's some scenes that play out like a Western, like a John Wayne style Western, like quite literally they'll be in the Western gear and everything for like episode 4. It's like half the movie is a Western. But it's like the whole thing was just so interesting to me. And I don't think every single piece of that worked, but I really liked it. Like one example is they're being interrogated. Olivia Colman and David Thewlis are being interrogated. And then the walls of the interrogation room get pulled apart and it's revealed that we're on a movie set. And then we walk over to another set and we see a recreation of the crime on this adjacent movie set. And it's like cool things like that. It's just like, that's so interesting, the way that they choose to do it. Yeah. So again, I'll just reiterate, Olivia Colman and David Thewlis are amazing, especially Olivia Colman. I think she's ridiculous in this show. So that is my recommend, but it's not for everyone, but I really loved it.
I did see Landscapers, and it's a bold and ambitious retelling of this true crime story. And it's definitely for all the people out there who like to see what you can push the boundaries with television and movie.
Yeah.
And it sure does. And it obviously boasts some incredible performances too. Now, I have 2 recommendations for you lovely people out there. One, I finally got to see Drive My Car, which is a 3-hour Japanese film that's up for Best Internet. It's going to be up. I can't imagine this not getting nominated.
I think it's the front runner now, right?
Yeah. Because it won the Golden Globe. And like, if this doesn't get nominated for Best International Film, I don't know what to tell you, Oscar people. But this film focuses on a director, an actor, whose wife passes away after, like, they have a very strange relationship. And he finds out like his wife was having affairs with younger men and stuff like that. And she passes away. And 2 years later, he gets a job directing a Chekhov play in Hiroshima. And the people who run the theater make him get a chauffeur. And he's very particular about his car, like this really nice red car that he has. And he winds up getting set up with this 23-year-old girl. And the film is really about their budding connection, dealing with grief, dealing with loss, dealing with regret and guilt. And the two of them have a very interesting dynamic with each other. And also about the creative process, whether it's directing or acting or writing. And it is 3 hours. And it's very methodical in how it plays out certain scenes. Like, there's certain scenes in this film that last 15, 20 minutes, where it's just like, it feels like a Tarantino film, where it's just like, you look at Pulp Fiction, like, how many scenes are in Pulp Fiction, which is 2.5 hours? Like, it really takes its time with things, but it's a very contemplative and very engrossing and thought-provoking film. And there's a couple of scenes in this where I was just like, I was sitting in this theater. I was at the Princeton Garden Theater, which I hadn't been back there this is my first time since before COVID. So I was very excited to go back because I used to go there all the time. I'm a member there. And I'm all the way in the top right corner of this theater. And I'm just like sitting there, like glued to the screen during some of these scenes. It's directed incredibly. I'm not surprised the director's getting some recognition and the lead actor is getting some recognition because it's a really impressive film. It's definitely not going to, we're continuing the train of this isn't going to be for everybody. I don't know if your mainstream audience member is going to watch a 3-hour Japanese film. Probably not, but it's definitely worth it. It was a great film and it really shot into my top 20 of 2021. Um, Getting to see that in Parallel Mothers the past 2 weekends, I'm like, finally. And then my other recommendation, which I'm going to be recording my movie club podcast for the month with my friends later this week, for Throne of Blood, which is
yes.
I finally got around to watching that. It's been on my watch list for a while, and now I'm like, I got to pick our movie this month. I'm like, I'm picking Throne of Blood. Especially after Tragedy of Macbeth came out. It is Akira Kurosawa's samurai version of Macbeth.
Yeah.
And boy, is it a visual treat. Mifune is just Mifune the whole entire time, and he is unhinged and just rocking it the whole entire time. And it's a really fine adaptation of Macbeth. It really works. It's intense, it's thrilling, and I was really impressed by the visuals that they're able to capture. And like, Akira Kurosawa is one of the greatest directors ever, so like, really shouldn't be a surprise, but it was something really impressive. And it's funny because I've been doing a thing on my TikTok. I'm trying to find ways to actually like do stuff on my TikTok, and every Sunday I'm doing a top 10 list. And this week I did my top 10 films of the 50s, and like Seven Samurai made them. Like, I'm becoming a very big Akira Kurosawa fan, and this just kept solidifying it because this movie's great.
Yeah. Have you seen Ikiru?
Yep.
That's my favorite.
I've seen Ikiru, this, Seven Samurai, Hidden Fortress, Rashomon, Yojimbo. I'm a huge fan of Yojimbo, especially because, you know, Fistful of Dollars. Yojimbo.
Yeah.
And Mifune, Clint Eastwood, both awesome.
Yeah.
So, and obviously Seven Samurai has been redone, reconfigured endless times. But High and Low, that was another one that I really recommend. It's a detective story.
Yeah, I need to see that one. That's the big one that I still got to check off. They're remaking Ikiru though, and it's coming out at Sundance right now. I've actually got a ticket. I'm going to try and watch it today. It's with Bill Nighy. It's called Living. I had no idea this was happening until a couple days ago, and I was like, I need to see this. And not only that, it's supposed to be pretty good.
So you know what? I love Bill Nighy so
me too.
So much. Yeah. That just made me super excited. For a second, I'm like, how dare they? And then you tell me that, I'm like,
but wait, Bill Nighy?
wait a minute. I'll see this movie. Yeah. Okay, I'm very interested now. I'm very interested to see how that turns out. So thank you for telling me this, Foster.
Yeah. When I saw this was happening, I was puzzled, and then I was intrigued. But yeah, it's like in the 50s. Like, he's a British man in the 1950s. That's how they're doing it. Like, if you look at the picture, there's like one photo that's available. It's like him in like one of those bowler hats or whatever, in a suit with like an umbrella that he's holding.
Okay, Living, because it doesn't even have a poster.
Yeah.
An English language adaptation of the script Ikiru set in London in the 50s.
Yeah.
Oliver Hermanus. Oh, that just makes me even more interested, because he directed Mafi that came out recently, and that's actually coming out on Blu-ray and DVD tomorrow, on Tuesday. Interesting. Well, here's the thing to look out for. See, we should have talked about that as a coming attraction. Now I'm much more excited about that than
I don't know how Sundance really works. You can just get tickets for things, but I feel like they don't have a distributor yet. So like, really, I don't think
legitimately this movie could come out in 2023. So there you go. Based off of this, I would assume that somebody would try to pick it up and put it out in December or something.
Yeah. But I would love if Bill Nighy got Oscar attention, because I don't think he's ever been nominated. But he's been so good forever.
Here's a controversial opinion here, because I have a very strong feeling about the Oscars and their lack of appreciation of motion capture work.
I knew it. Yeah. Go ahead.
Andy Serkis as Gollum or Caesar, and then Bill Nighy's Davy Jones, you all are sleeping on, because honestly, Davy Jones is one of my favorite villains in any movie. Just like, and Bill Nighy is so great. And even like something like Emma that came out a couple years, the whole innocence.
Yes, it's so good.
And him just sitting there, like him always being cold, and then having to like put up the
Oh yeah, bringing the little barriers.
Draft out. He's so great, and even him as like a phantom voice at the end of The World's End.
Yeah,
where he just like gets so frustrated, you're like, well, F it.
Yeah.
It just goes away.
The whole Cornetto trilogy, I love in Hot Fuzz. You want me to bring the chief inspector all the way down here? And reaches for the phone. Kenneth,
and he just comes like, Angel.
Yeah. How's the hand? Still a bit stiff. This is like, I've seen this movie 800 times. But he's
there we go.
And I'm really excited about Drive My Car. All these foreign movies, it kills me because like I don't really know how to watch them yet. But like, that and Parallel Mothers, like you were saying, I really want to see Worst Person in the World.
That because that technically hasn't released yet.
Yeah.
But I'm getting a screener this week, and I'm like, yes. But Parallel Mothers came out on Christmas, and
okay,
yeah, and finally came out in New Jersey last weekend. So I got to go see it. That's starting to expand a bit. Drive My Car is not. It's only playing at like indie theaters. Mm-hmm. So like AMC's don't have it yet or anything like that. But Parallel Mothers is starting to play at like AMC's and stuff like that.
Yeah.
The biggest one, and this isn't even an international film. I've been waiting since October for The Souvenir Part 2 to come out anywhere.
Yeah.
And literally for months, the only place it was playing was somewhere in Brooklyn.
Yes, and I'm like, that's how it always is.
And I'm not taking a train, taking a subway. So drive to a train station, take the train to Manhattan, take a subway to Brooklyn just to see The Souvenir Part 2. Yeah. And they finally did an A24 screener room virtual screening of both Souvenirs this past week. And I finally got to go see it. It cost me $20 to watch it at home. And I'm like, I don't care. I've been waiting for months for this. So there's just some feelings there about, distributions and stuff like that.
Also, do you know about Memoria? The Tilda Swinton movie?
That and Petite Maman are the two, which that's coming out on Mubi on February 18th on streaming. So I'm like ready for that. But yeah, Tilda Swinton's Memoria, I haven't can't find that anywhere.
They're going 1 week at a time to a different theater across the United States. So the first one was in New York, thankfully. So I watched it. I mean, wasn't really my cup of tea. It moves at like a glacial pace, but it's like the kind of movie, like half the people are like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever seen. And the other half are like transcendent. I was moved to tears. This is a meditation on life. And, it's like one of those movies. So like some people are really into it and I totally get it. But that's how they're doing it. Apparently it's never coming to Blu-ray or streaming or anything like that. It's just going one by one across the country to a single theater at a time for 1 week. Kind of interesting.
I have a lot of feelings.
Yeah.
A lot of feelings about that. Because, I'm just trying to wrap up the last movies that I want to see from 2021. So, move on with my life into 2022. And basically it's just Memoria and Petite Maman. And I guess technically Minamata with Johnny Depp in it, which is like a Japanese film, I think it is. And I'm just like, I think that's just going to wind up on streaming at some point on VOD, and I'll just watch it there. But, it's that weird time of year where it's just like, is Cyrano even count as a 2021 film at this point? Coming out February 25th now.
Yeah.
Ridiculous. But anyway, Foster, thank you so much again for coming on to Welcome to the Wasteland. And he'll be popping on to Lost in the Wasteland very shortly. And we'll chat about that when we stop recording. But Foster, thank you again. And you all should go check out Foster on Letterboxd. And what's your username?
FOSTH101.
There you go. Thank you again, Foster. And thank all of you out there for always tuning in and supporting your Wasteland Reviewer.